Welcome, everyone, to the Kansas Reflector's weekly update. My name's Clay Wirestone. I'm the Reflector's opinion editor.
I'm Editor-in-Chief Sherman Smith.
And we are coming to you today from the Kansas Reflector offices, or at least our podcast studios. How are you doing today, Sherman?
I am peachy, Clay. How are you?
I am peachy keen being able to do this catch-up roundup with you.
Very good.
Okay, so let's get started. A lot going on this last week from a lot of different fronts. Let's start, I guess, with the State Board of Education.
Yeah, senior reporter Tim Carpenter wrote about the novelty here of having 5 Republican incumbents. All 5 of them decided not to file for re-election. So it's a wide open race for all of those seats. Could have really significant impact on the makeup of that board, whether a Republican or Democrat wins in each of these races.
Well, and to be clear, the State Board of Education has 10 seats. 5 of them are up for election every 2 years. So members serve 4-year terms.
And I think one of the interesting things here is that the ones who are stepping down now were elected in 2022 when COVID policies were really driving a lot of people to run for that office.
Well, COVID policies, and then there was all of the chatter for a time about, critical race theory, and which eventually, mutated into talk about DEI and all of this other stuff.
You just have to wonder how many people, not just there, but in local school boards, got into this position all fired up and then realized that there's some real work to do.
Indeed. Also, in terms of, I guess, Topeka, state capitol news, Attorney General Chris Kobach was in the news trying to stop Governor Laura Kelly from potentially doing something.
Yeah, he called a news conference down in Wichita, flanked by law enforcement and the victims' family members for those who were killed by the people who are on death row right now. What's interesting about this, there is a clemency application filed a few weeks ago on behalf of all of the individuals, the 9 individuals in Kansas who have been sentenced to death. So far in Kansas, since the death penalty was reinstated over 30 years ago, nobody has actually been put to death. The last time was somewhere in the mid-60s before the federal Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, kind of put a stop on this everywhere, and then kind of the rules got straightened out in the 70s. Kansas has had other people who were convicted and sentenced to death who were then later had those convictions overturned, ended up with a different sentence. I think a couple of people have actually just died of natural causes while being in prison during that time. What Chris Kobach was urging the governor to do is to reject this clemency application. He believes the death penalty is appropriate based on the severity of their crimes.
Well, and as Sherman has noted, the death penalty is theoretically legal in Kansas, and yet has not been exercised. Again, for more than going on more than 60 years now, and so you have really the death penalty in Kansas is almost more a rhetorical device than anything else. Like, I don't even think we're particularly close to the executions of anyone on death row at this point.
No, and I think that for some of the opponents of the death penalty, they look at the cost of doing this. Because it's a death penalty case, there are certain standards that, the level of defense that these defendants get, both at the trial but also on appeal, it's very costly. It drags out for years and years and years. As you say, there's still no end in sight to any of these individuals who have been on death row. We've seen other objections. The American Civil Liberties Union filed a lawsuit trying to get the Kansas death penalty overturned here a couple of years ago. That was dismissed more on procedural grounds than anything. But the evidence in that case showed, a lot of problems with everything from jury selection to the decision of who do you seek the death penalty against versus who do you just seek life in prison. And of course, the ACLU nationwide has looked at this to say I think about 10% of the people who have been sentenced to death in the country since the 1970s were later either exonerated or have their convictions overturned, which is not as high of an accuracy rate as you want if you're going to kill somebody. And the other objection here has come from the Catholic Church last fall with some legislators too. If you really believe in the sanctity of life, you have a hard time arguing that somebody should be put to death. So there's been I think a lot of movement behind this idea of not setting any of these people free, but saying life in prison is the more appropriate sentence based on all of that. Obviously, Chris Kobach feels differently. The assumption here is that if the governor were to make a decision on this or any number of high-profile cases, I've written in the past about people like Sarah Gonzalez McGlynn, who was convicted of killing her abuser. No question that she killed him, but there was a lot of details that the jury didn't know. The assumption here is that if the governor were to make a decision in these high-profile cases, it would come after the November election.
As makes sense, because we already have an election season in full swing.
Yes.
So other things that happened this past week, Sherman? Anything on your mind?
There's a lot of heartburn around the screwworm, this flesh-eating fly, right?
That's true. So the screwworm is a pest that infects livestock. Interestingly enough, it is not a particular threat to humans. If you eat steak from, or meat from an animal that was infected with screwworm, it doesn't really do anything, assuming that meat is cooked. The threat is mainly to the animals themselves. It can be cured with medical treatment. But I think it has become a political hot button issue here in the United States and in Kansas, because screwworm was actually eradicated from the United States in the 1960s. It was driven down south, and it was actually contained, I believe, to Panama, largely until about 3 years ago. And in 2023, it began to head back north. There's actually scientific dispute as to why that is or to how that happened. Screwworm is not carried from one person to another. It is transmitted from one animal to another. And so we've seen a lot of blame cast from the current administration, Donald Trump, and of course Kansas's U.S. Senator Roger Marshall, to say that, this is all because of the previous administration, the Biden administration. Biden was president, of course, in 2023. Whereas other people are saying, well, if you look at things like Elon Musk's Department of Governmental Efficiency cuts in 2025, and other sorts of examples of the government taking its eye off the ball in the first year or two of the second Trump administration, that more of the blame should be going to the Trump folks. Regardless, I mean, there's a well-known fix for all of this, which involves breeding sterile flies, they're called. Basically, the female screwworms can only mate once. They mate with the sterile fly. They don't have any offspring, and that's how you reduce the populations. They are currently ramping up production of these sterile flies and, are going to deploy them. It's going to be costly. It's going to take some time. And of course, with prices being the way they are now, particularly for meat, I don't know if you've been pricing any ground beef lately, but it's a little alarming.
Yeah, we had a power outage for a couple of days here following storms at my house, and so very attuned to having to replace a bunch of beef in the freezer.
And so I mean, it's definitely going to increase those prices. Livestock producers are not going to want to move their herds around in the same way, because there's going to be concerns about picking up screwworm. Obviously, it's expensive to inspect, because screwworms, I guess, grow in wounds, and the wounds can be as tiny as like a pinprick, essentially, or very, very small, and so that takes a lot of time.
Yeah. Another creepy crawly news last week, Anna Kaminsky was writing about the surge in ER visits because of tick bites.
Which I'm a little surprised that people are going to the ER for ticks,
Yeah.
but I guess it is good, on the other hand, that people are more aware now than they were at one point that obviously there are potentially tick-borne diseases. So check yourself for
Yes.
ticks, I think, as the country song goes.
I'll take your word for it.
I think it's about checking someone for ticks, but I will not sing it now for copyright reasons.
We also had a lot of excitement this week around the launch of the World Cup, the highly anticipated World Cup games, FIFA, I guess you'd
FIFA,
say,
yes.
yeah, football, soccer, whatever you call it, happening in the Kansas City area. We have the Algerian team in Lawrence.
That's right.
And
Well, I think the big question, and we've had a couple of pieces. One from Anna Kaminsky, who you mentioned, one from our Friday columnist Eric Thomas. Really the Kansas City area, because both Kansas City, Missouri, and then the Kansas City, Kansas area, which includes Johnson County down into Lawrence. We have these teams coming in. We have a number of games scheduled for the region. The game started this last week. Just in the overall contest. The real question is will the crowd show up? Will people show up? And, I think a lot of the planning was done with the concept that we would be overwhelmed by crowds, by soccer fans. And I think as we've gotten closer to the actual events, there is now more skepticism. I mean, I suspect there will still be a lot of people around, but will it be quite as many as was originally forecast?
yeah, everything from the costs of visas to the immigration enforcement policies to high prices for things in anticipation of this, I think deterred a lot of people. We spent a lot of taxpayer money on this in Kansas to support this. Now the people, at the city level, the event level, they're looking at this like it's going to be so much easier to operate, to provide security, to make sure people aren't waiting in long lines, as Eric Thomas wrote about. So it's not like there's a calamity here. It's not going to have the same economic impact that the rosiest forecast looked at.
And I think there's also the question here. I mean, and this was not from our reporting. This was from other regional media reporting.
Shout out to Matthew Kelly at the Kansas City Star. He did some good reporting on this.
That FIFA reserved a lot of hotel rooms in the Kansas City area, and then canceled a lot of those rooms. Apparently, this is more or less standard procedure, but folks here didn't necessarily know that. And so, I think some of the hospitality industry folks are, trying to get their room sold.
But in the meantime, we get to all amuse ourselves with these social media posts from our friends overseas who are taking in the Kansas heat and delicacies.
And looking at local fast food, I know folks. There's good stuff from the South. Going to a Waffle House and the like. Here in Kansas, I think it's probably just more, oh my God, what is this heat and humidity?
Yeah.
Which is also what I'm asking.
Yeah. What else happened this week?
I don't know. Sherman, you had the list. We talked about screwworm, ticks, Board of Education World Cup.
We have a controversy over the No Labels Kansas party.
Ah, yes.
Senior reporter Morgan Chilson covered a court hearing Thursday where they were challenging the Secretary of State's decision to dissolve the party. This is a thing that happened a couple of years ago. It goes back to a couple of years. National No Labels Party set up a party in Kansas, apparently decided not to do anything in Kansas. A couple of political consultants saw an opportunity here to seize control of the party, or at least to say, I think from their standpoint, if we say we're the leaders of this party, we can have the name. Like nobody has ownership of that name was kind of their viewpoint, I think.
And they went through it by registering a trade, and there was some particular.
Yeah, they trademarked a business name or something like that.
Yes, which was not necessarily the process that you go through for forming a political party or being the official leaders of that party.
A couple of years ago, I published the video of Chris Van Meeteren holding the official meeting for the party, which is just a selfie video where he's making all the motions and deciding everything. the Secretary of State looked at this and said, "You guys aren't the real leaders of this. Get out of here." So they challenged that. The judge basically said, "This is not my arena. The Secretary of State can decide what he wants to decide." So refused to intervene in this, being decided at the moment that we are recording this by the State Objections Board. Our intern, Bea Burgess, is over there covering it. So look for her story to find out whether they were able to make their Hail Mary and get on the ballot. I suspect that they will not.
Well, and to me, I think it's an interesting question and something I think that Van Meegeren and and folks aligned with his efforts are saying, which is, there's so much appetite for candidates and for voices that are not from the conventional two-party system.
Yeah.
And so, you have an organization that has gone through some sort of effort to create this third-party vehicle, and then just kind of seeing it destroyed or being just kind of tossed aside seems to be a shame.
Well, and I think also he makes a point that the objections board that has the authority to handle this dispute is the governor, the attorney general, and the secretary of state. And Van Meegeren argues, the two parties in charge are not going to let a third party in. So it's a kind of a rigged system for him.
Which it tends to often be the argument, not just in Kansas, but in many other states when you're dealing with third parties or kind of independent candidates. The system is designed largely by and upheld mostly by people who are beholden to the two parties.
Yeah, they don't want to give up their power.
So looking ahead, Sherman, looking ahead to this upcoming week, what are we working on here at the Reflector?
Yeah, we're working on a couple of things. One of our freelance reporters, Grace Hills, is looking at this decision by the U.S. Department of Education to really lower the hammer on 4 Kansas school districts over what I would describe as inclusive policies for LGBTQ kids. The department, after the Trump administration took over, sent out kind of scary letters to all the school districts. School districts responded by saying, we'll comply with whatever policies you want us to. Now the department is saying, it's not enough for you to say you're going to comply. We're still going to punish you for, apparently what they did 5 years ago or whenever this was. The school districts, I read the statement, the response from the Olathe School District, where they say, we don't understand what the point of this exercise is if it was predetermined that you're going to punish us no matter what corrections or what actions we took. And the stakes are really high. The U.S. Department of Education says they could pull all of their federal funding and also potentially could bring punitive damages against the schools.
Well, and this is especially tricky because these schools, these are largely northeast, schools located in highest population, highest density, in many ways kind of fairly politically liberal section of Kansas. They've attracted some conservative activists' attention before it got into the Department of Education, and so they've been in the spotlight kind of right before this happened and continuing. I think there's a real question here about kind of the chilling effects of something like this because they're kind of being made an example of.
And I think for the schools, I think they feel like whatever policies this administration wants them to adopt could also land them in hot water with the next administration. Certainly when you go back and forth on these extremes of who's in Washington, it puts schools in a no-win position.
Absolutely.
The other big story that we plan to have this week is coming from senior reporter Morgan Chilson. She's done a lot of investigative work around this landfill in Galena, in southeast Kansas, where residents have been complaining about the noxious smells coming from this smoldering landfill. This is an area that was formerly called Hell's Half Acre because it's where there are a lot of mining activity decades ago, and it became a Superfund site to try to clean it up. It's one of those things where there's just a lot of concerns about the air quality, whether anybody's doing proper monitoring, what the state's involvement is. I think there's hydrogen sulfide. That's a big problem. And so there's a class action lawsuit now and just trying to make sense of everything that's going on down there.
Well, that will be something to look forward to. I mean, not if you're near the landfill, obviously, but reading the story.
That's right.
Um,
And we'll keep tabs, of course, on all the political news coming out of the election.
Also, this is usually the point during our videos where we tell you to subscribe to our newsletter. We will do that in a moment. But also, I think we should say that this week is a fundraising week at Kansas Reflector.
Yes.
You can go to kansasreflector.com/donate. That's kansasreflector.com/donate to chip in if you like what you read and hear and see at Kansas Reflector.
That's right. A couple of the things we've talked about here, the local donations directly support things like being able to send Morgan to Southeast Kansas to do this work. The open records request that we file, to have a summer intern, Beta Purchase. She would not be here if we didn't have strong local donations coming from all of you. It supports us being able to have this office space here at the First Presbyterian Church in Topeka so that we can record our podcasts and conduct interviews and get together to work as a team.
And so, yes, we don't want to belabor the point, but again, if you want to help us out, we appreciate it very much. And now, on to the next thing. Another way to help us out, and a cheaper way, is also you can subscribe to our newsletter at kansasreflector.com/subscribe. That's kansasreflector.com/subscribe.
Yes, as I remind folks every week, that is a free daily newsletter. You don't have to pay anything for the subscription. You don't have to pay to read any of the stories. Our public service model is that everything is free for you to read with no advertising.
Yep. But if you want to,
we welcome
help.
donations.
Anyway, thanks so much for watching. My name's Clay Wirestone.
I'm Sherman Smith.
Take care.